All right, thank you everybody for joining. Today we're going to be focusing on really how to maximize results through performance reviews and goals. Just a couple of notes as we kind of start the presentation. We're going to be reaching out to everybody in a day or two to give everybody the slides and have the opportunity to have that information with you. And the same thing with the recording. In case you're interested in sharing that with anybody, you'll have that material as well. And there are some dial-in participants. So if it seems like we may be reading from the slides, we want to make sure that the people on the phone and who are listening in get all of that information. And we will be answering questions as they come in, so feel free to write any questions that you have in the Q&A area, and we'll do our best to kind of answer those as we go along in the presentation. To give you some idea about who's actually presenting today, my name is Colin Peterson. I'm one of the client service consultants here at Hello Team. And really I focus on working one-on-one with our clients to make sure that all of their needs are met, and we're really focusing on how to improve their employees' engagement through performance, through goals in that one-on-one setting. And I am joined today by the founder and CEO of Hello Team. And do you want to give a quick background of your skills?
Sure. Well, thank you, Colin, for the introduction. As Colin mentioned, I'm the CEO and founder of Hello Team, and I really started the company because I saw there was a need for making sure that people are engaged, inspired, connected. They know how the goals that they're working on connect to the overall goals of the organization, that we provide them with a variety of feedback, so it's beyond the annual performance review, and really try to make the organization better by making sure that our people are better and they're committed to the vision of the organization.
Perfect.
So with that.
And the three strategies that we're going to be focusing on really learning today is the importance of tracking our employees' goals throughout the kind of review period, whether that's quarterly or annually, some best practices around performance reviews, and how to modernize your performance review process to maybe one that's a little bit more, regulated and automated.
All right, so let's begin. We're going to try to make this interactive today. We're going to go through some PowerPoint material as well. We'll log in into our own Hello Team demo system, and we'll show you how we can utilize some of the best practices we're learning today and start doing them in our own organizations. So this is a perfect time to talk about goals and performance management, as it is kind of towards the end of the year. We're doing some retrospectives on how well we've done during the year and what are some of the things that we'd like to incorporate in our processes for next year, so we're set up for success. And one of the first things that I'd like to talk about today is what we call the performance review flywheel. And this is really a way for everybody to think about how can we establish a robust and comprehensive performance review program that people actually are a part of, and instead of kind of dreading the process, they're part of the process and they're almost looking forward to it. So it really has three sort of aspects. First is goal. Are we tracking the right goals for our organization and for our employees, and have a way to see how we're doing against our commitments to the organization over time throughout the year. Second is competencies. Are we really going back and making sure that we don't review competencies just when we hire somebody, but also throughout the year again, and make sure that we provide a pathway for people if they'd like to step up into the organization, that they know what they need to work on in order to achieve that. And the third part of the flywheel is values. Again, when we hire people, we often test them, whether it's in a conversation or some other way, for whether they fit into the culture that we have established. But as the year is progressing, sometimes our values change, we update them, and there's change in the organization that's happening in itself. And it's a good idea to keep a constant pulse to make sure that everybody knows the values and they can see whether they continue to be a good cultural match within the organization. So with that, let's go through and talk a little bit about the goals tracking process. And a lot of times, in order for us to provide that sort of process where employees actually are not dreading the annual performance review or the quarterly, if you have it, we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the employees. Why are they maybe afraid of that? And especially if it's a new employee, they may not know, they've joined 6 months ago, how are they going to be appraised at the end of the year? So one of the first thing is that we need to be able to establish a clear goal setting process within the organization. And that's very important for the existing employees as well as somebody that we've just onboarded. What type of goal setting methodology are we using? Are we using the SMART framework? Are we using objectives and key results, OKRs? Are we using other methodologies like traction or V2MOM? There's many of them. And not being clear about that sets kind of like a confusion around everybody, and we're not able to align behind a methodology and a way for us to drive the performance of the company. A second thing is that we often write some of the goals at the beginning of the year. But again, as there's change in the company, as people are coming and going or they're moving departments, we often only do an appraisal at the end of the year. And a lot of those things can get forgotten. If you ask me what I did right now in January and I haven't been really kind of keeping up with what I've been doing, I'm not going to remember exactly what I did, and there may be a missed opportunity for me to showcase my achievements as well as my manager to remember how to actually rate me at the end of the year. Another issue is that oftentimes goals are not done in a collaborative and transparent way. They're set from the top, and we're not having the conversations from the company down to the executive staff to the different department heads and their own employees, so we can calibrate the goals so the goals and the approach can be more of a bottom-up, top-down, bottom-up again approach. And then sometimes we do things in a lot of variety of ways. We ask people to submit goals, they send them via spreadsheet, they send them via PowerPoint, and you really can't do a comprehensive goal tracking kind of process if everything is all over the place and we're all writing goals in a very, very different way. And then last but not least, oftentimes people have questions. So if we select, let's say, the objectives and key results framework, that framework says that we should not be tying goals to performance. But then we walk around in the office and say, hey, we're using the objectives and key results. And then the employees get confused and say, okay, so then how am I going to get my bonus at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter if you're using aspirational goals instead of specific goals, which is what the SMARTS framework kind of prescribes. So there's a lot of things that go, and we need to make sure that all of our employees, all of our managers, our executive team really understands the terminology that we're using so we don't set ourselves up for confusion.
We wanted to do a quick poll about how are you currently tracking your employees' goals? And these can be things like SMART goals, OKRs, traction, KPIs, or if you're not tracking goals at all right now. I'll give it a little bit more time for people to fill out these responses. And we see quite a few coming in right now. And right now it's looking like from the people that have submitted, and I'll share the results soon, that most people aren't tracking their goals, or they're using kind of that beginning level SMART goals, which is still a good way to kind of begin that goal setting process, since it's the one that a lot of employees already recognize. They know that, it should be specific, measurable, achievable goals. And, Tanya, if you want to elaborate on this at all.
Do we want to share the results so people
Absolutely.
can see them? Yeah, so this is the 47, almost half of the people at the webinar today have no formal way of tracking goals. So this is perfect timing to talk about this, and we'll be showing you a little bit from our system so you can visualize how you can get started with that process. And it's really not that scary. Even though we're in Halloween week, you should not be spooked by performance reviews and goal setting. So let's continue. This is interesting information. I'm glad to see that a lot of people are using the SMART methodology, and some of you are dabbling in the OKR process as well, and we can talk about that. So as Colin mentioned, SMART goals stand for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. And that's what we really, no matter kind of what a framework we use, even with the KPIs, they could be extended to be SMART goals. We want to make sure that every goal fits that, it can answer those questions. So at the end of the day, when you do it, you actually know that this is something that has been achieved. So it's a yes or a no at the end of the day. Now, what's become very popular over the past, I would say, maybe 3-4 years, depending on where you are in the country, because it originated from Silicon Valley type companies, is the objectives and key results framework. And I just wanted to point out some of the differences between that and what you may be using with SMART or KPI or MBOs. So the framework really talks about how all goals should be transparent. And I'm a believer, again, whether it's SMART goals or something else, that the more people know about what they need to accomplish and how that relates to the overall corporate goals, the more effective they can be in how they do their work. And because this way, the more transparent goals they are, we are communicating clearly with everybody in the organization. If you do X, this is how it affects your department. And if the department does X, this is how it affects the overall organization. And another big point in the OKR framework, as opposed to, let's say, MBOs, is the frequency. It really makes you think about goals in smaller chunks. So instead of thinking about what are the things that I need to accomplish for the whole year, I want to be thinking about what I want to accomplish in this quarter, break it down into smaller chunks in a way that I can answer that question at the end. Was I able to accomplish that goal? Was I able to hire 5 people by the end of Q1? Or was I able to hire only 3 people? So it's a clear yes or no type of question. And then last but not least is the aspirational aspect of it. So the OKRs make you think about not just what is realistic, which is in the SMART framework, but have you stretch yourself to do something that you may not think you'll be able to do. So an example of that would be, let's say I want to run a marathon, but I've only ran a 10K so far. So at the end of the day, I may be training for the whole quarter for the marathon for 3 months, and I can go to the marathon and not be able to accomplish and finish, but I was able to do 20 of the miles, right? So in that sense, you are thinking when you're grading the objective and key result for the end as part of your performance review, you can really give yourselves 70% or 80% is considered amazing instead of 100% because you have stretched yourself. So a lot of times people mix and match a little bit of that and make sure that people are writing things that they will push themselves to do, even though they know it's not realistic to achieve them in that time frame. And for that, it's very important that we don't tie those goals to compensation, because we want people to be doing more than they can do, and we don't want to penalize them and then they never stretch themselves again, and they're only giving us goals that in a way that we call sandbagging them, right?
And we did have one question about it. It said, do you mean that all goals are transparent for each department, so finance will know what communications goals are?
Yes. So especially in the OKR framework, it is true. All of the goals are transparent, except if you have some personal goals that may not be, confidential, that they may not, you may not want to share. They may relate to HR. Maybe somebody's on a PIP, etc. You don't want to post that, of course. But yes, so what that does is if finance and communications, let's say, they all have their goals very clearly and they're part of the corporate objective of the year. So finance's objective could be that they meet all the budget requirements of the company. So we meet our revenue and we meet our expense projections for the quarter. And finance and marketing could be that they increase the brand of the company, but they also do it within budget. So it's important that people are seeing what the other department is working on, because then if I come to you and I ask you whether it's for help or it's a cross-functional team, or maybe I'm from marketing and maybe I'm evaluating a PR vendor. I want somebody from finance to sit on that. Then we're able to work within the top goals of the company because we know what's important. So yes, that is a great point. And also the other thing is, it just focuses the effort of everybody. Everybody knows what's important. We're not wasting time on things that are not, everything's measurable. We can see how far along everybody is, and we use it as a way to celebrate success.
All right, and then one other person had just asked, so to reiterate, OKR is objective and key results.
I'm sorry, to read.
For OKR, was just what that stands
yes. OKRs, yes. It stands for objectives and key results. And usually the objective is the main goal, which could be something like, and we'll go through some examples and Colin will show in the system as well. The objective or the main goal, let's say, it would be, hire best talent. So, but then the key results underneath are the steps that are needed to achieve that objective or the sub goals. They will be the specific and the measurable things, and the things that I can answer with a yes or a no. Was I able to hire 10 people, or was I able just to hire 8, and why was that? So that would stand for this. Next thing we want to quickly talk about as well is what's a typical goal cycle, and we'll talk about how many of you are doing performance reviews and which are tied to that goal tracking, right? Are they doing it quarterly or annually? So this assumes that we're doing quarterly goals, because goals can keep changing. The top 3 or 5 goals for the company may stay the same for the whole year, but we're tweaking different things underneath because we're living in a fast-paced world and we can't wait now from January to December to just keep working on the same thing if for example, things and priorities have changed. And this allows us to set up those frequent communications. So the corporate objectives are set by the CEO, the department heads or the executive team has a direct line to the CEO, and everybody is discussing what's important to achieve, what are their 3 to 5 goals that are needed to achieve the corporate objective. And then you may have teams underneath that are cross-functional, that they're also talking to the department managers, figuring out, okay, what are we doing? in this quarter? How are we going to achieve this? And then you have individual objectives that, again, you're negotiating between the manager and, let's say, the 10 direct reports that that manager has, but we're doing it all in a collaborative way. So it's not me as a manager telling you, here's the 3 things that you need to get done. I, as an employee, should also have a way of expressing, is this something that's doable? How am I going to contribute? What do I need from my manager, from the business to support me in achieving this? And all of that is achieved by having also regular one-on-one meetings that get scheduled within the manager and their direct employee. So with that, we can show a little bit of a cycle as well, and of how this would work. So let's say we're in Q4 right now, or Q1 of next year, we're setting ourselves up. So the first week of Q4, we will be closing the goals of the last quarter, let's say Q3. So all of us are sitting, we are going through saying what we were able to achieve. Are we at 80%? Are we at 100%? Etc. Then in the following week of the quarter, we will be having a discussion within our group, whether it's the team or the department, of what do we want to achieve in the next quarter. Let's talk about it. Let's surface all of the 3 to 5 things that are important for us to hit the corporate objectives. And we're going to go back and forth a few times. So it's not that just top to bottom approach, but the employees are having part of the conversation. So we do this, we negotiate, so to say, within the next 2 or 3 weeks. We all write our goals, we cascade them up, we can align them to a goal that's higher in the organization. So then we can really track those KPIs and those metrics and how they evolve. Within that quarter, we're monitoring how are we doing, how are we against progress, and we're scheduling our one-on-one meetings. So whether that's once a week, some people do bi-weekly, some people do once a month. Again, that's as long as you're having some sort of cadence that everybody understands and it's happening within that quarter, you're quickly able to help that employee if they're not achieving something because they're relying on somebody else, whatever it is. You're not waiting until the end of the quarter to find out that something wasn't done and it could have been prevented. And then again, you do the same cycle towards the end of the quarter and the next quarter. So it's a repeatable process that everybody understands from the get-go.
And now will be a quick time where we're just going to show you a quick demo of how this may be able to help you and your organization with the help of technology and kind of using a goal tracking software. So this is the actual Hello Team system, and one of the things that we talked about that was important is really working to align company goals from the executive leadership team to department goals to personal goals. And this will kind of give you that opportunity. So in this example that we kind of put into the demo is one of that company goals for really an HR-driven company is increase employee satisfaction. And you can see that there's one specific department goal aligned to that. And that says hire, develop, engage, and retain top talent. And you can see that this is assigned to the human resources department for this quarter. So any department, and this is where we talked about transparency. If you are interested in looking at what all of the other departments were working on for this quarter, you'd be able to get that information. And then it's really coming down to the personal goals part, and where we talked about, sometimes it's just starting with a SMART goal, or it's whether those OKRs. And this is, something that would be an example of a SMART goal where you're just looking to hire 10 employees. This is something that's easy enough to update as you progress along in your goals. And you can see that it's automatically calculating, and then your total goal calculation up top. And this gives managers easy access to be able to see how are their employees tracking along in their goals. And This is another example. You can just drag it along to create that percentage completion, or goals that are really those binary goals. Sometimes it's attend this conference as my professional development goal for that quarter. And that's when you'd be able to click that you've either done it or you've not done it. And another opportunity for the actual use of technology and goal tracking is that through comments, you're able to archive your progress along the way. So you're able to say that, on October 29th, you've listed that 80% of their managers completed their one-on-one, which is why you've kind of moved that progress bar accordingly. And this gives managers and employees the opportunity to go back and forth and have that conversation about their goals, which really kind of helps them, in real time know that, hey, I've completed this goal, and not wait until the end of that review period to realize that maybe that wasn't up to the manager's expectations, because there may have been a miscommunication between the two. Something else, just showing you how easy it is to kind of add that goal, whether or not you're looking to do the top-down or bottom-up approach for goal making, is just kind of entering in any goal that you'd like, aligning it. So that's where it can either be to a specific department or for the whole company. And something else that's important that we've seen as kind of growing more and more in the workforce is assigning weights to goals. If you're in the sales department, you hitting your revenue numbers are going to be, maybe an 8 out of 10 for your whole job performance. That's really what you're being judged on. And maybe there's another sub goal of maybe to improve, your communication, where that could be weighted as a 2. We really want to get into the habit of being able to reflect more important goals, so that when people are achieving 100% of that important goal and maybe only 50% of their kind of less important goal, it's not showing it as somewhere in the middle. We want to be able to reflect for the difficulty and their actual job function that they're accomplishing that. And systems like ours will allow you to, do quarterly goals, yearly goals, custom goals. And for those of, the companies that aren't ready for that fully transparent goals practice, it still gives you the opportunity to make it private so that it's just you, your direct supervisor. And depending on really who you're looking to make that goal for, by default, it'll be for you and your goal. But in the case that, you're looking to maybe make it be your direct report, Beth Cole, you'd be able to assign that person a goal. And something that's, a good part, I know somebody had a question about how you have, a lot of people underneath you and you're looking how to stay up to date with people's goals. The important part for the My Team page under the Hello Team system gives you a breakdown of all of your employees and how far along they are for this quarter, this year, in tracking their goals. So you'd be able to see here that Beth is 50% through her goals, while Sharon is 68. That gives you the idea, maybe it's getting to the end of the quarter and Beth is only at 50%. That's when you need to start, building that value through the one-on-ones, through feedback, to kind of gauge where they are. Maybe what can you help with as their manager to help that employee reach their goals? And this comes back to the one-on-ones. This is ability to, check in with people's goals and their performance on a more regular basis. So you can see here, these are the questions that we should be asking on how people are tracking to their goals. What, as the manager, can you do a little bit better? And then the benefit of this system and kind of a more formalized archived system is you can go back, maybe at the end of the year when they haven't completed it, to say, you thought you were in good position, and that you didn't really need somebody else from the team's help. This gives you that opportunity to kind of go back and have that information already logged. And really kind of that's the best parts about having a system in place for goal tracking.
Yep. And one more thing that I wanted to point out as well while we're on goals, because I know a lot of people had questions on what is objective and key result, or how do I do goals, and 50% of you kind of said that you're in the beginning stages of that process. It's I wanted to point out the way, again, that we are writing goals. So as you can see, I can say improve employee engagement as my main goal, but it's really important of what I've listed underneath that to really make sure that it fits the SMART characteristic. And I can then decide if I want to make this an aspirational or a realistic type of goal. So for example, here, we're not saying, okay, just make sure that people do one-on-ones, but what are we holding ourselves accountable to? I want to give myself to say 75% of my managers do it every week. And then next quarter, I may want to give myself a stretch goal and say 90% of my managers should do this like every one-on-one every week. But it's something that I can go back to and really take a look and say, did they do it? And if they're not, it's on me, because I should be driving this process and making sure that they really accomplish that. Or performance reviews. At the end of the day, we're not the ones writing everybody's performance reviews as HR people. It's the managers that are doing it, and employees completing their self-evaluations. But I want to stay on top of the process and say 90% of the reviews, I want people to get them by the second week. And then I'll figure out what do I need to do to make sure that happens, whether I send them an email, whether I have a one-on-one with the manager and express that it's very important that they get done. But again, I am keeping this, and when somebody asks, should that be transparent? Absolutely, because then I can point to that and say, hey, it is part of my objectives, just like you have objectives to get done, that all of you complete your performance management by the deadline that's been set up from the organization. So that's what transparent goals are able to achieve, because we can't hide behind, I know when you tell me that you're working on something, that it is really true, or you're just trying to brush me off, if that makes sense.
And we did have a question about the time frame for everybody's goals. So for employees that have different start dates, so it really kind of depends on what you as an organization are looking for. As people kind of start in January, they have that full year of expectations for kind of accomplishing a year's worth of goals. But like you guys mentioned, what happens when somebody actually starts in September or October? What do those goals reflect going forward through the rest of the year?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And usually what we see as best practices and what people do, what we do in our own organization, is we set up a sort of like a 90-day checklist for that employee. Obviously, they're not going to be able to contribute right away as if somebody else has been in the company for 2 years. However, there's requirements that they need to complete within their first 90 days, whether they get trained on how to use different systems, whether it's you need to meet 5 people in the organization and receive kind of training from them and get to know people better, whatever it is, document it. So even when these employees are starting, it's something that they do right away. It's in their fiber and in the culture that I'm going to join in, and I'm going to make my 90-day plan of what I'm doing in the company. And by me having access again to the transparent goals, I can go and see, what does the company care about? What does my department care about? What are my peers working on? It's all information available to me that I'll be able to customize my goals and then talk to my manager and say, hey, this is what I want to do within the next 90 days. And then when we're doing a performance review, what we'll make sure that it happens is that, again, you're not going to have the whole year for the performance review, but they'll have a sliver of that information, how you've behaved for those 90 days, which
and now we can take a little bit more dive back into the actual performance reviews.
And we talked a lot about that already, but to get started, it's, don't be scared. If it's something that you're doing for the first time, let's say this quarter, there's so many ways for this to get complicated. Keep it simple. Make sure that the company has 3 to 5 objectives, that the department has 3 to 5 objectives, and the employees have that. And whether you work on aligning that as your first quarter, probably not. Make sure that people know how to write goals and they're writing good goals, as we've talked about. And then once people master that skill, then start working on how do I cascade it from top to bottom and bottom up, and I have that conversation. Again, set up a period, make sure everybody understands. If you're doing quarterly goals, then it's a quarterly process. If you're doing semi-annual, that's what you're doing. Figure out if you want people to do aspirational goals or realistic, or you want to do a little bit of both, and decide what type of goals should be transparent, which should be private, and as I mentioned, work on your cascading as kind of like your next goal for yourself as well. With that, we want to talk about how to weave that into the performance review. And just like the goal setting process, put yourself in the shoes of the employee, of what they need to accomplish together with their day-to-day job in order to make sure that there is a consistent, continuous performance feedback process on top of the annual, if you're doing an annual performance review. So often what happens is the employees feel like, oh, what's in it for me? Why do I have to complete this long questionnaire of questions and write about strengths and weaknesses and accomplishments, etc. And I still have to do my 9 to 5 job. And employees look at this as a way to, instead of how do I provide valuable feedback so somebody gets better within the organization, they're saying, oh, am I going to get fired and have to have this difficult conversation? But I haven't been receiving any feedback throughout the whole year, so I'm not sure where I stand. There shouldn't be surprises at the end of the year. Another thing is that when we do it in a paper type process, when it's not something that can be automatically analyzed, and for the information to be at your fingertips, and you're trying to sift through what did this person do, when did they do it, but how do other people feel about it. It can take weeks to kind of get through that, and by the time you do it, now you're in Q2 of the next year, and it just loses the whole purpose of why we did it in the first place. And then becomes what I call, what have you done for me lately effect, because if I'm not tracking my goals and I have to remember what I did 12 months ago, I surely will miss a lot of things and a chance to kind of showcase everything that I've achieved. And my manager is sitting there and saying, oh, well, I can only remember what she did last month, and I can't really remember what she was doing at the beginning of the year, so I'm not getting all the credit for all my work.
And now it's going to be a quick poll just about the frequency. Really, you're doing your performance reviews now. So it's just going to be choosing between annually, semi-annually, quarterly, monthly, or you don't really have that kind of performance review system in place right now. We'll give it a little while longer for everybody to have the opportunity to click in. All right, and I will share the results now. So you can see that really the most popular option is an annual review. And that doesn't really surprise us that much, because that's kind of the one that, has been that long-standing tradition, the big annual review, that you're really judged on based on compensation sometimes, and for that entire year's worth of progress. Something that's becoming a little bit more popular is trying to do it kind of more frequently to get kind of more continuous feedback loop, which is definitely important to kind of get that feedback, figure out how do we improve. but really kind of it comes down to having, a basis and a technology to be able to do that. Since we, understand the cost behind running performance reviews. And obviously, the more frequent that you're running it, the more time and money that's typically invested in it. All right.
Yeah, not surprising. And what we're advocating for is if it's an organization that's used to doing an annual performance review, there's no appetite to switch to more of a quarterly review or semi-annual. You could still be doing things in between the year to make sure that not everything kind of gets towards the end and employees are not receiving the frequent feedback that they may need in order to perform their job. So you could be doing a quick 360 assessment for, let's say, values or competencies every quarter or every 6 months, just to keep a pulse on the organization, or many other ways to provide kind of informal feedback as well to the employees, or recognition if it's positive reinforcement. So the couple of other things that I wanted to briefly touch upon before we jump back into the product and we show you some of the performance management capabilities is that sometimes the opposite happens and we get a little bit more fixated on goals as the sole measurement of how we've done for the year, and we don't go through competencies and values and evaluate our employees against those towards the end of the performance review cycle. So what we say is that we need to make sure that we pick 3 to 5 competencies that are important for the job that they're in. They could be a combination of behavioral, functional, or professional, and make sure that people are performing, we are rating how people are performing against those. And that usually should not be just done by the employees as self-evaluation as the manager, but there should be some sort of peer group that also analyzes the performance of that individual. And again, don't make it too qualitative. Make sure that it's quantitative, that people can do like easy ratings, and this way you can incorporate it throughout the year and not just the end. And then second is, we often when we hire somebody, we talk about values and the type of values that are important to our company. But when we actually go throughout the year, we forget to ask the people around them, is this person still a good cultural fit for our organization? Has anything changed? And we often at the end, we find out when we have to let go of the person that a lot of people have thought, oh, well, they're not a good cultural fit. Well, we should have kind of tested for that earlier in the process and throughout, and not just waited for a whole year to pass by to really figure that out. That being said, I want to leave a little bit of time to show how this works in Hello Team as well. There's many types of feedback that could be provided throughout the year: one-on-ones, informal, the 360 reviews, and a formal evaluation for the end of the year. And we can do a brief overview of those.
Absolutely. So really, performance reviews, the main thing we want to be able to see is that they're easy to use. We want people to be notified, reminded, since really that's where a lot of that admin work comes from. But it also comes into, are we asking the right questions and are we doing it in the right way? So right now there's, popular to be doing 360 reviews, taking input from the team. So here in the Hello Team system, you can see that 6 people were responding to a review of Ryan Coleman, the CEO. And you can see here that the average of people's reviews for his core technical competencies was a 4.17. And this kind of goes along the entire, whole review, giving you the entire breakdown. And then the important part is that we're able to see maybe there's a disconnect between what Ryan thinks and what the actual team thinks of him. So you can dive into his self-evaluation, or maybe he thought himself as a 5 for his core technical competencies, and Abigail as a 4. So in the case that maybe he was ranking himself as a 9, that is that clear disconnect, and how we can kind of build on that. It's also good to have a system like ours that you can download the overall statistics or the granulated feedback from each individual employee. As well as being able to go back in previous reviews and see if Ryan is trending in an upward direction. And that's what we want to see from our direct reports, our employees in our organization, because that means that we're slowly getting better, and that's going to push the company forward. And when it comes to an actual performance review, you want a system that's going to be able to be recurring. For those of you that are doing annually, that may be the bump that takes it to, let's try doing it every 6 months. So you can set it up to be every month, and to give people maybe 2 months, a month to be able to fill out the review. The system will automatically send out reviews, reminders every 7 days to be able to get people up to date and say, hey, you were notified before, but you still have a review outstanding. And for those of you that may use Slack, this also gets pushed out to Slack so that it's easy access for people to take the review on the go or at any time. There's never that excuse for, hey, it wasn't filled out, which is a great thing. And the other part is actual kind of sharing criteria. This system allows for people to being able to see that Team 360 review and kind of have the names attached. Or you could just allow the average general statistics. So leaving out people's names and just kind of compiling all of that information together in one spot. And as well as having a template for the entire company. By sharing it with Alex, you're giving them the ability to view the results, send the review, to edit, and to delete the review. So for teams that are cross-functional, this is a great way to kind of send these reviews out to employees. Something else that's interesting to kind of take a look at is the actual analytics behind reviews. Depending on if you're using qualitative and quantitative information, you're able to see on a kind of scale for the quality of work, who is really excelling, and then who's maybe falling behind. So this gives you the opportunity to see that, wow, Beth Cole is excelling over everybody else. She's consistently, at the top of the group every single quarter, every single year. Those are the people that we need to start identifying as people to promote, because that's how we keep them engaged, is continue to move them up to the positions that they're really striving for in their career. And that's the good part about this system as well, where you can see the positions that employees are interested in. So you don't need to have that conversation about, hey, you've been doing really well, what would you like to do? The managers already have that information, as well as any skills they'd like to have, and the ability to see where they are in their current goals. So that's definitely an improvement to be able to stay up to date on people's reviews. And the same thing we touched on in this My Team, for people to be able to see their direct reports and how well they're doing. This gives people the ability at any time to go in and say, I wonder how Beth did in her 2019 performance review. With just a click of a button from that page, you're able to see the entire breakdown of that person's review, which many times with paper reviews or Excel, it takes a while to be able to find the document, go in, look at the results. Whereas this streamlines the process and makes it a lot easier for people to have access to that information. And another part of that kind of constant feedback cycle, even if you're using a system and doing an annual review, you still want an opportunity and an area to be able to leave feedback for employees. And this can be done from employee to employee, manager to employee, or even employee to manager, to be able to have feedback. So you're able to have this documented and accessed at any time, so that people don't have to wait until that review to find out that maybe they've been doing something wrong. They can kind of take immediate adjustments to be able to correct their work. And this other part is just going back to the one-on-ones. These can be really anything that you want them to be. It's all kind of customizable, where you can ask any questions, have any discussion with your employees to really meet the need of your company, to meet the need of that conversation that you're looking to have at that time. And that's where you're going to see a lot of value in acquiring a system.
Yeah, and also talking about putting yourselves in the shoes of the employee. This way, you're putting yourself in the shoes of the managers, because oftentimes managers don't really know how to structure a one-on-one or what type of questions they should be asking to facilitate it. You're helping everybody get better. All of us have new managers that have been, from a sole contributor, been promoted to a manager. They haven't taken kind of the courses and the necessary steps to know how to have those type of conversations, whether it's around feedback or one-on-one, and you're really giving them a way to shine because they're getting better at their management type skills.
And really it just comes down to how do we create and automate a performance review program? And this comes down to, custom questions. Let's start going into quantitative so that we can kind of get those analytics behind our employees, but not forget about the qualitative information about name something that this employee did really well this kind of review period and something that they can improve on. Questions like those are really important to have that dialogue with the managers and employees about kind of how to correct and adjust and keep going if they're doing things really well. And that's sharing with others, kind of that transparency conversation that we had is kind of make things a little bit more visible. Don't be afraid to give feedback to employees. The idea that one size shouldn't fit all is absolutely true when it comes to performance reviews. I think a lot of smaller companies and even larger companies kind of take general templates that they think they may be productive, but then at the end of the review period, they say, wow, we didn't really get that much value out of this review. You want to make sure that you're always getting the information on what you'd like. And that's really kind of the basis for getting an automated system. And the idea just to set it and forget it, having a recurring system to automatically send out the review when it's time, and to send out those reminders so that we're really reducing the time that we're following up with employees to get that information filled out. And having it accessible to employees. That's meaning, sending it to their email, their Slack, having reminders from the system about their goals, about where they are so that they can't fall behind and forget that information. And the last part is really just analyzing the results of your performance review program, comparing, analyzing, identify points of pain for specific departments so that you can see maybe there's a problem with management there. Maybe there's a problem in that specific location. This will give you that opportunity to go into a little bit more finite detail and really find the problems, the true root of the problems. And the last part is seeing results, through your HRIS. Having the information like the profile to be able to see what positions people are interested in, so that we can kind of make sure that they're happy with their role and they're always moving up in the company.
As well as if they're an engaged employee. Are they giving and receiving recognition through high fives or providing feedback? Because that's a sign of an engaged employee. So we can look at a performance review. It could be, one way on paper, but it really tells more behind the person. Are they, are they won any badges for whatever the value is in the company? Are they being selected as an employee of the quarter? Are people without prompt giving them those accolades and recognition throughout the year?
And it's really how do we get there? That's looking into a digital platform like Hello Team that'll be able to grow with you, that has an opportunity to take in those different components. It's not just about let's do the performance review or let's do a one-on-one. Let's take a look into more of the profiles, because we need to look at performance and just employee engagement in a more holistic view, to be able to tie in different modules. And that's make continuous feedback a part of your culture. Make it easy for people to give feedback. Eliminate some of the barriers. Sometimes people have, the connotation behind feedback that it's always negative, where sometimes we need to kind of make it out that this is going to be something that's going to help you grow. And kind of the faster people kind of offer up feedback and take that feedback, the faster they're going to be in the seat that they want. And that's kind of shifting the perception of performance reviews to the opportunity to show off their accomplishments. That this should be a time of the year that people are proud to be able to say what they've been working on, and show that all of their team loves working with them, that they've contributed a lot. And it shouldn't be the danger of, ooh, it's performance review time. I'm just worried about kind of my compensation and if I'm going to get that bonus. And that starts with kind of the HR professionals kind of in this webinar right now, is getting that executive buy-in. Once kind of your executive team is excited about this, it's going to be a no-brainer to the rest of the company that this is going to be able to be something that provides value. And that's to the executives on a higher level, from being able to see who are the people that are doing really well so that we can get them part of that management team, and being able to contribute more. And lastly, it's just taking it one step at a time. Like Tanya mentioned, if you're doing an annual review and maybe if you're doing slight goal tracking right now, it's not the best move to be able to, let's do a weekly performance review or a weekly one-on-one. Let's maybe make it quarterly. And it's just making that one step at a time to that more frequent feedback cycle. And that means you're doing a great job.
Yeah, it's just like any other skill, goal setting and performance reviews and how to do one-on-ones. It all takes a little bit of time for people to really feel comfortable, and then it becomes second nature and they can't live without it because that's how they're organizing their work and their accomplishments. So that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, we want to do great work and to have fun while we do that great work.
Absolutely. And for anybody interested in either Hello Team, or if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or team@helloteam.com, and we'd be happy to kind of answer any of those questions. I know that we got one about how long does it take to set up a platform like this, and you'd be kind of paired with your own dedicated client service manager, which is something that we definitely pride ourselves on, as some other platforms in the space. And we really make it a pain-free process from importing, employee data to the entire final upload, to about a month's process to be able to get your team up and running on a system like this, to begin kind of tracking that employee's goals, getting together a performance management system that works for you, rather than the other way around.
Yeah, and what Colin and his team are great about is also providing with a lot of training and best practices around any of those areas that you may feel like you need a little bit of help, or to get that executive buy-in, because not everybody has been in that kind of a process. So we really try to partner up with our customers and make sure that we're an extended part of their team and their experience, and they can rely on us for help with a lot of questions like that.
Absolutely. And if anybody has any questions, we can reach back out to you, since it is getting close to 3 o'clock Eastern. So we'll be in contact with you if you are posting any questions. But we thank you really for spending the time with us today to learn a little bit more about it. And definitely reach out to me or to team@helloteam.com if there's anything else that we may be able to help you with.
Well, with that, thank you, everybody. And again, yes, thank you for the time that you've spent with us this afternoon. We'll send all of the information, and feel free to share with your teams and your managers as well.
All right.
Have a great rest of the week.